you could deport anyone, who would it be? It can be anyone. I've heard about ex-husbands, lots of politicians being mentioned. Who would it be if you could deport someone, and why? I want to turn my attention now to a week in politics, and joining me now, John Boothman, political correspondent of the Sunday Times in Scotland. Good morning, John.
How are you, David?
I'm all right, thank you very much indeed. I mean, politically, it's so fascinating, those big headlines this morning, the US exacting revenge on Starmer's government, their secret weapon, David Lammy. That worries me extraordinarily. And also, just in terms of that, Nigel Farage loving this over in the United States. Now, I had an idea that for this section, what we should do is to look at who's had a good week, who's had a bad week, who should have a week off. So let's start with a good week. Who's had a good week?
Look, it hasn't even started yet, and there's Donald Trump, the world's famous Scotsman, I always call him. He's going to swear on the Bible given to him by his Scottish mother, his oath of allegiance tomorrow. But, you know, he's not started. And do you know what? We're all Trumpians now. And if we're not, we're dancing to his tune. Internal opposition in America has evaporated in his own party. The Democrats are muted. Internationally, you know, I heard the hostage parent, sad story this morning, Israeli hostage parent, thanking not Joe Biden, but Donald Trump for the deal that's not quite happened yet. Absolutely astonishing. And as you say, tomorrow we'll get a big blizzard of executive orders. We'll get that migration, deportations you've talked about. There'll be stuff in the economy. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Keir Starmer should be worried. The Mandelson story you've mentioned. We've got the prospect of tariffs. Now, I'm sitting here in Scotland. Our favourite national drink, whiskey, might be subject to tariffs. One of our biggest exports, salmon, might be subject to tariffs. There's concerns about the whole country, the UK, and defence spending, it not being high enough. Where are we going to find the money for that? Worrying times for the UK government with Trump being in office. But you know what? We're all on his side now, or if we're not, we better get into line.
We were talking about this. The fact is that Keir Starmer came into office. They talked, Georgie was saying in a very erudite manner, talking about that Starmer and Reeves had talked down the British economy. Oh, it's woe is me, and we got 20 billion hole, fixing the foundations, working people, blah, blah, blah. The thing that Trump has done, and very successfully, is he's galvanised the people of America. He's going to make America great again. This is what I'm going to do. This is how you win at politics. You build from the grassroots. You say, right, this is the vision. This is what I'm going to do. And look, it's worked.
Look, you know, you can't talk about jam tomorrow if jam tomorrow is going to be in 10 years' time. And that's the big mistake that Starmer's actually made, I think. You know, people need hope. They need something to cling on to. The other thing that I find absolutely fascinating is how Trump has managed and does talk the language of ordinary Americans. Ordinary Americans, when you speak to them, they talk in the way that he talks. He's captured the language. We know what his agenda is. It's simple. It's straightforward. You know, who can remember even now anything that Kamala Harris stood for? And, you know, somehow or other, you know, British politicians, certainly those in all of the mainstream political parties, seem way behind and way out of step with people in the country.
Just looking at this, I mean, it is fascinating, the power dynamics that are going on. Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. Of course, he sent people over to campaign for Kamala Harris. He's now saying, right, OK, I'm going to exact my revenge. I'm going to campaign for Nigel Farage. There will be some very worried faces in number 10 today.
I'm struck both in Scotland and across the UK, not just in number 10, but in the Conservatives, about how no one has a strategy to combat Nigel Farage. No one will know how to cope or knows how to cope with these kind of things that are being talked about round about Elon Musk, round about Trump, and certainly not, you know, in electoral terms. We've got an election. You've got an election in England, council elections coming up in May. And if Reform make great progress there, that's a big platform moving on to, and this is where I have a big interest in, the Scottish and Welsh elections next year. Now, reform is taken off in Scotland, not in the same way as it's taken off in England and in Wales. But do you know what? They're doing pretty well. They could be the kingmakers about who's in the government in Scotland after the elections in 2026.
So Donald Trump, you say you're nominating him as the person who's had the best week. I would have said Nigel Farage is having a pretty good week as well.
I don't disagree with any of that. You know what? Nigel Farage actually doesn't need to do anything very much, and he'll have a good week because all of the things that have happened off the ineptitude of the Starmer government, the crazy decisions that they appear to have taken, which have really hacked off big sections of the electorate. Old people in particular. Now, old people were always the bedrock of Labour support, and all of that seems to have gone. And as I say, Nigel Farage is picking up support from everywhere. You focused an awful lot on what it means for the Tories, but actually this is very bad news for Labour as well.
OK, so who's had a bad week?
Well, you know, I couldn't help but think about what was happening where I live. Now, there's always a great interest in Nicola Sturgeon. It's nearly 2 years since she left office, and last week, 2 years, February 2023.
Wow, that's flown.
Sturgeon. And do you know what? There's still a lot of interest in her. Last week, she announced that she was divorcing her husband, Peter Murrell, of 14 years. They've been together for 20 years. All of this, of course, on the back of, the situation the SNP still faces, a big dark shadow over the top of them about the police investigation into their finances. It emerged yesterday in the papers that the house that they live in, her husband, Peter Murrell, can't sell it. Can't get out loans in it because of restrictions put in place by the Crown relating to the embezzlement charges that he still faces. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon, despite the fact, as I say, that she continues to protest her innocence, she's still part of that investigation by the police as well.
Were you surprised with that announcement about the divorce?
No, not really. I mean, you know... Look, Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell have been together, as I say, nearly 20 years, but it's kind of been an open secret. They live together in the same house, but, you know, nobody was surprised by this announcement. You know, she seems to be staying part of the week in Edinburgh in a house owned by Val McDermid, the crime writer. She then stays, she still says they're living together in the same roof in this house in Uddingston in Glasgow. But do you know what? Nobody was really much surprised about it. The other thing that's around, of course, is that, you know, although she remains a member of the Scottish Parliament, there's been an awful lot of criticism about a lack of attendance there. Poor attendance there. She hardly ever contributes in debates, and at the same time she's set up a private company now, set that up September, I think, 2023, in order to put her outside earnings in. She's already had, I think, 75,000 in the first of 4 payments of that level for an autobiography that's coming out later this year. She's making other earnings from book reviews and various other things. So it's an interesting time, an interesting period. But as I say, there's huge interest still, it appears, not just in Scotland but across the UK, on what happens next with Nicola Sturgeon. Will she stand? Will she not stand in the next Scottish elections? We suspect she won't. But anyway, as I say, she's had a hell of a week.
She's had a hell of a week, you're right. Which politicians should we keep an eye on this week?
Look, we've seen it all morning already. We need to keep an eye on what Bibi Netanyahu does, the Prime Minister of Israel. Let's hope this ceasefire actually starts and holds, but we need to be careful in seeing how he reacts. He's in a difficult situation inside his own cabinet. One cabinet member's already resigned. That he's not exactly popular with huge swathes of opinion in Israel. Now that Donald Trump comes in, there will be a rapport between Trump and him. Let's watch what happens, not just in Gaza. Let's see what what happens in the forthcoming period in Iran, for example. There's all other places where we need to keep our eye on, like Lebanon and Yemen as well. So I think the critical person in all of this and how he reacts, and as I say, let's hope they can get that ceasefire underway today and as early as possible. Let's see the release of those hostages. That's key to all of it. Let's see those aid trucks getting into Gaza, but how Netanyahu reacts to all this, particularly given the domestic political situation he faces, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's finally, your nomination, please, for a politician who should have the week off.
Oh, look, I'm fed up hearing the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, telling us about that jam tomorrow.
Oh, she makes her own lunch, John. She packs her lunch, she puts it in her Tupperware. And
well,
she nicks the pastries. She nicks pastries and sticks it in there.
Well, that's cool, right? And good for her. I just want her to take a week off and maybe try and sort some of this stuff out. You know, we've got big issues in this country, not just in terms of all those borrowing costs that we are talking about, the prospect of more public expenditure cuts coming. You know, if you're an employer in this country, there's a lot of talk about what it might mean, and it hasn't happened yet. Come the beginning of April, this is going to be a big blow. Those national insurance employer contributions, you know, all of the increases that are coming as a result of the national living wage and the national minimum wage, this is going to hit businesses hard, and it's the complete antithesis of, you know, what she says is her first mission, to promote economic growth in this country. And this is not a good period the country is going through. She herself might be in danger if those elections that we were talking about in May don't go Labour's way. So, again, it's something worth watching, but I just want to go away, hide behind the sofa, go and hide under the desk. She can take her Tupperware dish with her as well, and her pastries, and try and work out where we're going next.
Brilliant. Such a pleasure, John. Really good to talk to you this morning. John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times.